Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 53 of the Rambler podcast, where we are passionate about sharing what makes Cathedral Prep the standard of excellence. On this episode of the podcast, we're thrilled to have Abby Quinn on as a guest. Abby joined the Yale staff in the summer of 2021 when she was appointed the Director of Sport Performance, Quality Control, and promoted to Internship Director in fall 2022. In addition to this role, she also serves as the head strength and conditioning coach for the men's basketball, women's soccer, volleyball, and gymnastic teams, as well as assists with the football program. In March of 2024, she was promoted to the Associate Director of Sport Performance. Abby initially spent the fall of 2020 interning with Yale, then went on to take a temporary assistant strength position at Notre Dame in the spring of 2021. During her time with the Fighting Irish, she assisted with all Olympic sports and took over the strength training for the men's and women's swimming teams. Abby graduated from Villa Maria Academy in 2013 and then went on to attend Gannon University and played collegiate water polo. While there, she received her bachelor's in sports and exercise science and a minor in psychology. After graduating in 2019, she stayed at Gannon to pursue her master's in applied exercise science and specialized in strength and conditioning. During this time, she worked as a graduate assistant strength coach for Gannon's women's basketball team, as well as taking on strength internship in the NBA G League for the Erie Bayhawks, who was an affiliate with the New Orleans Pelicans. Abby is certified by the National Strength and Conditioning Association, has her USAWL-1 coaching certificate, and also holds the NASM Corrective Exercise Specialist certification along with the CPR and AED through the American Heart Association. So all that to say, Abby, thanks and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
And I have to say, I was joking with you before we went live here, but my first virtual podcast episode, I think that causes for a celebration, right? That's a good thing.
Right? Excited to try it out. I appreciate you making it work since I can't be in Erie right now.
Yeah, well, reading your bio, you got a lot of busy things happening. You've been all over the place. I mean, congratulations. You've only been gone from Villa for about 10 years now, but you've been doing some really great stuff in your career.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Villa kind of gave me that foundation. And then staying local and continuing my education at Gannon definitely helped, and staying in the community. I coached at Villa a little bit when I was done with high school. So definitely got me my start in this field for sure.
And I think that's where you and I first met, actually, when I was manager over at the event center. And I would see you there for the practices and everything. So it's good to see you still around and helping out the program while we had you.
Yeah, it was fun.
So you were mentioning, your time at Villa really helped kind of, create, that start of where you're at now. Can you even take us back to when you're in 7th, 8th grade, you're looking at different schools, high schools that you'd want to attend? What was it about Villa Maria Academy ultimately that made you decide you wanted to go there?
I'm going to be completely honest. If we take it back to 7th grade, I wanted nothing to do with Villa. It was going back to all girls. I knew nothing about it. All my friends were going to Mercyhurst or Collegiate, so that's where I wanted to go. My mom was like, just give it a shot. Just give it a shot. We went to all the open houses for every school in the area. And then slowly warmed up to the idea. I swam pretty much my whole life since 2nd grade. Starting probably about 7th grade, the water polo coach at Villa started reaching out. They would always come to like the Diocesan Championship swim meets, and that kind of piqued my interest a little bit. That was the only school that had water polo and swimming. So I was like, okay. And then by like 8th grade, did the open house, and I was warming up to it a little bit more, really interested in water polo, had a good swim program, all the athletics there. My mom really wanted me to go to a Catholic school as well. My grade school was Catholic. I went to St. George, and she thought we did know a lot of people in the community and stuff like that. So there was one day my dad put 2 of the acceptance letters in front of me, said pick one. We went to Villa. And the rest was kind of history. Kind of went from there, but then luckily was able to jump into the water polo team, had a phenomenal experience that kept me in the pool, kept me in shape to go right into swim season. Another great experience with that coaching staff as well. And then kind of, went from there, was involved in a ton of clubs. I had amazing high school experience that I never would have thought of in 7th grade.
Isn't that so funny? I mean, you go from being polar opposite of where you expected, just wanted nothing to do with it, and here you are, you know.
Yeah, my mom knew what she was doing. She did. She was like, just give it a shot.
Well, and that's one of the things that like sometimes you just get set in one direction and you need a parent's influence to help guide you. And so that worked out for you. And I'm glad to hear that. And like you mentioned, some great coaches who have been between prep and Villa through the years. And I know Coach Whitman, obviously Sonia has been a great influence in your life and whatnot. Can you talk about the relationship you have with Sonia and just how that has formed over the years too?
Yeah, so she didn't join the coaching staff at Villa until my sophomore year. So I had a different coach my freshman year. Then we kind of lost her, and then we were like, "Oh, great, who are they going to bring in?" And Sonia was actually previously the water polo coach at Fairview, so we all
Mm,
knew her, but didn't really love her yet because we played against her. So we we're a little
right.
nervous, a little apprehensive, but she fully embraced it. She knew what she was walking into, but she, actively decided to become part of like the Villa family and coach us. She was all in on us day one. So she grew on me very, very quickly. One of my biggest role models to this day. We still stay in touch. Here and there, not as frequently, but multiple times a year, we reach out and text. But really, really helped me grow and develop. I can, attribute her to some of my first experiences in the weight room, which is what I do now. I was kind of hitting a little bit of a plateau, about my junior year swimming wise, which sometimes females do. She's really big into CrossFit. I still believe does it to this day. But she was like, "Hey, one of the gyms I go to is near where you live. Why don't you try to do weightlifting, incorporate that, add some new elements into your training? Come to the gym that I go to." My dad had gone with me before as well. And that was kind of my first exposure to weightlifting. Fell in love with it. Really, really changed my life and my training. So I would be, lifting with her at 5 o'clock in the morning, going to the pool for morning practice, go to school at Villa, then walk over the pool for practice. So she was a big, big part of my life and all of that. And then stayed extremely supportive year round. Shortly after high school, obviously went to college. I actually started college at Gannon as a nursing major. I don't know why, but I thought I wanted to be a nurse. Took me 3 years to figure out I did not. And then a few days after, I decided to switch my major. Got a call from Villa, from the water polo coaches, Rob and Adrian. They had asked if I wanted to help coach the JV team and the varsity team. So it was my first real exposure to coaching. Came a couple days after I changed my major. So I was like, this is just a sign right here.
Yeah.
Fell in love with coaching. They let me do everything in the weight room. And then Sonia had needed an assistant coach, jumped on board, went right into swim season, stuck with her for a couple years as well. That's kind of where I fell in love with coaching. So Villa kind of ties into all of this as well with my coaching career, and kind of did that throughout my undergrad into my master's program. And that's where I got into some of those other later opportunities as well. But that kind of kickstarted how I got here.
Yeah, and I wasn't ever a swimmer, but I've always heard how great of a coach Sonia's been, and like we said, Rob and Adrian and just others that have been through Prep and Villa. But obviously Sonia, just through the years and what she's gone on to accomplish, now running both the boys and girls team here at Prep. It's just great kudos to her and the work that she does, and obviously the care of the athletes and student first. But then for you in athletics, say, hey, come work out with me. I'm going to be there at 5 in the morning. Come work out right by my side, and let's go
Yeah.
swim and train. Yeah.
Yeah, she still keeps up with everything. She'll reach out, when she saw the team at March Madness this past year, she was cheering me on. So it's been great to have her through this journey. And, she always says, she's like, I can't believe like you're reaching out or saying that I'm such a big mentor. I'm like, you are a huge part of this. So I appreciate her so much.
That's awesome. When you look back at your time at Villa, maybe outside of athletics, what are some other things that really stick out to you? Some of your, quote unquote, favorite memories, so to speak.
So I'm not sure how many traditions you guys still kind of have now that the schools are combined. But we did have sports day. That was a huge one when I was at Villa. I was actually, for some reason, on the dance team. No idea why my friends signed me up. So I participated in that. I cannot dance.
So we
But
still do sports day, but we don't do the
okay.
dance component anymore.
Yeah.
Something changed after COVID, and the students got together, talked about it with administration, and they decided to scratch that part. But we did have sports day actually this past Friday, and it was over
Okay.
at the event center. It was a lot of fun. Yeah.
No, I love that they still keep that going. So that was a big one. Mary's Day, super memorable. Still have all my letters to this day, and envelopes from each year. So that was a great one. Trying to think, those are the two big ones that stand out. The other ones are really just, when I'm Villa's basketball program, or the basketball program you guys have now, is still very good. But I remember my freshman year, buses to Penn State for the state championship. That was a big core memory. Just going to all the sporting events, and then going to states at Bucknell for the sports that I competed in, and then getting to go back again with Sonia as a coach was huge as well. So
Yeah.
everything kind of came full circle. I did as an athlete there, and then got to do it as a coach as well. So those are probably my biggest memories from when I was there.
Yeah, how cool is that? And we do as well, Mary's Day. So last year was the first year we did it with the co-ed prep, and we did it in the cathedral. And it was actually a really nice touch. A lot of the teachers who came from Villa to prep just talked about how special it was being at the cathedral now, all the students together. And we do have Mary's Day this coming week, coming up here, that we're recording it. So
Yeah, awesome.
yeah, nice long-standing tradition from Villa that we brought over here to prep too. Um, so now, getting into a little bit more about your career and some of the things that you've gone on to accomplish so far. You mentioned a little bit that you were in nursing for 3 years and then ultimately decided to pursue what you're doing now. What inspired you to pursue that? I know you've talked a lot already about just kind of Sonia's influence and athletics. But was there a moment for you that really you just remember as it kind of was like, you know what, this is what I want to pursue long term as my career?
Not necessarily. I think I had a little bit of an idea of it once I finally came to terms with I should no longer spend more time pursuing nursing. Instantly in my head I was like, okay, there's an exercise science major at Gannon. I can easily transition to a lot of my science classes carry over. I'm not going to be super behind. And I was like, oh, there's an athletic training program. And at the time, just given that there's not a ton of large schools with like D1 athletics in Erie, I didn't quite know exactly what that meant. So once I started looking into what athletic training was, I was like, oh, okay, they're the ones that are, first responders running out on the field. They're in the training room doing the post-op rehab, things like that. I love my athletic trainers and respect the work that they do, because I could not do it, but I was like, that is not what I want to do. So that was the big deciding factor, was I knew that there were coaches in the weight room. And then once I finally figured out those are the strength coaches, athletic trainers, those are those ones on the field that you see. First off, they're doing that rehab. They do a ton more than what I'm saying. But those are kind of like the big things that you see right away. And my big thing is I'm very, very passionate about lifting in terms of how it can progress and develop athletes. However, also that injury prevention side of things. So obviously I have athletes I have to return from injury. However, I do want to be on that side of things that helps them grow and develop so that they do not get hurt and do not get injured. So that's kind of what my big deciding factor is. I also just love the atmosphere of being in a weight room. I wear gym clothes to work and scream in a weight room and listen to music all day. So I have the best job in the world. So it just kind of like the environment also was a big draw to me. Like I said, Sonia got me into a gym very, very early. I stuck with it, always loved it. So it took a little bit of time, probably over the course of the first semester after I switched. And then I really know I was like, oh, okay, I can actually make a career out of this. It probably won't be in Erie, but I can do this. So,
Yeah.
so
Well, to your point, there's things like injury prevention with strength training that's so important, especially when you're working with college athletes. It's not just about getting stronger, but it's functional strength too, depending on their specific sport and what they need. I don't want to act like I know what that means, but
that sounded great.
Well, thanks. But just growing up playing sports, and as you watch certain videos growing up, and you have enough physical therapy sessions, you start to figure out this and that about how your body works, and you start to hear about those things. But yeah, I mean, what you do is so crucial, especially with the work you're doing at Yale, specifically with those athletes there. I can imagine it's pretty tough and dynamic to go from different sports. I mean, in your bio is listing off like 4 or 5 different teams you're working at any different time. Can you talk about a little bit about that balance that you have to find with working with the individual needs of athletes? Because I think people are listening to this podcast, it might not all be in human performance and strength training, but the idea of how you have to learn as a professional to be dynamic and how to be flexible to call it your client and how to work with them on different aspects, that part is very applicable to people listening. But yeah, so if you don't mind just kind of talking a little bit about that and what your mindset is going into different coaching sessions.
Yeah, so kind of looking at the sports as a whole, because obviously the sports you listed that I work with, I never actually played myself, so I have to do a lot of research. My athletes always make fun of me. I'm not a land sport athlete. I did everything in the water, so I have a lot to learn. But the big thing, what I usually start off with is, in athletics, the big one that you address first is a contact or non-contact sport. So for football, when I'm looking at my linemen, they need to get hit by other people that are 300 pounds. You know what I mean? My volleyball players, really not. They're more powerful, explosive, plyometric-based jumping. So I look at contact versus non-contact, and then what elements are we looking at? Are they, a field sport where they're covering distance? My women's soccer players, when I pull their GPS pods, some of them cover 10 miles in a game. My volleyball players do not. So it's kind of what elements do we need there for the conditioning, and then how much strength do we need, repeatability, our plyometrics, are they jumping, are they not jumping, are they a power-based sport, things like that. So I kind of run through the list. Once I get the grasp on that, what season do they play in? Are they a fall, winter, or spring sport? How much time do I have with them? Because we are in the Ivy League, we cannot force athletes to stay in the summer. Luckily, a lot of them choose to be here to train with us, but not all of them do. So how much, where's the summer in regards to when we're going to play next? How much time do I get? How many days a week is the coach giving me in the weight room? How much are they doing on the field or on the court that's going to complement my training? And then it's also different teams have different cultures and different things that they need. And then the last layer too that I always look at for each sport, and we'll talk through it every year with the coaches and kind of assess, but what is the biggest injury that sport gets? Are they prone to ACLs, rolled ankles, wrist injuries? I recently took over gymnastics this past year, and found out, on their landings, they usually blow their ACLs. On their takeoffs, they usually tear their Achilles. So that was two huge things that I wanted to address in my programming. So that's usually kind of how I start. Obviously, there's a lot more layers to it. How much previous training have they had coming into college? How comfortable are they in the weight room? What is the team culture in the weight room? I don't work with basketball the same way I work with football, the same way I work with gymnastics. So a little bit all over the place, but that's kind of how I start with the teams and addressing those differences and then kind of go from there.
Well, one thing I can tell for sure, and I want the listeners of the podcast to hear this too, is that you are just sound like a true professional, not just in your industry, but in the amount of knowledge and care you take to assessing the needs of the athletes you're working with. And that's something I think is such a good lesson for people listening. Maybe they're younger in their career or they want to continue to grow in their career. There's a lot of thought, effort, planning, intentionality behind what you do, that you don't just all of a sudden become the associate director of sports performance at Yale just because you had this background. The things that you just talked about are just exemplifying who you are and how you do that in your career. So I think it's just a great lesson. I'm listening to you thinking, wow, she definitely knows her stuff and she definitely cares. Yeah, no, absolutely. And can you talk to us about what it was like for you? Kind of talking about your title just now, but going from an intern to being able to be in the position you're at now. Can you talk to about that transition and that journey and what that was like for you doing that?
Yeah, it was crazy. So I was wrapping up my master's program at Gannon. I was coaching with Sonia at the time, and I was working in the G League, working with Gannon's basketball team. And then I'll never forget, we drove to Bucknell, taking Villa's swim team to states, pulled in the parking lot, and they said, turn around, and they shut everything down for COVID. And we had to drive home with a bus full of crying kids, and I felt but that was such a key part to it, because then COVID hit, all sports were shut down, which directly impacted my career and what I was going to do. So kind of just finished up my program virtually. And Yale was one of the only places I could find that was still offering internships. They would still bring you on campus, because a lot of places, I know like Rutgers was doing a virtual internship, a bunch of different places. But what really sets you apart and gets you those full-time jobs is the in-person training hours, the hours on the floor. That's what's most important. So I was like, you know what, Mom and Dad, we're gonna go to New Haven. I need to go. So they were all in. So they dropped me off, and then that's kind of where I started everything. That was my first real exposure to strength and conditioning. I will say, like, Villa and Gannon really prepped me with the science, the education piece. But once you really get into coaching, especially strength and conditioning at the D1 level, you know nothing until you're actually doing it. The textbooks don't teach you anything. You don't learn anything in the lectures. You understand the kinesiology, the anatomy, all of that, but actually coaching and that art to it, was really exposed to it. I fell in love with the program at Yale, learned so much, got a ton of opportunities with the athletes every day. The Ivy League wasn't competing that year, but kids were still training. So I got to be with them. And then luckily from there, I was going to actually stay for a second semester because COVID was still going on, but things were slowly getting back. But I was going to stay for another semester, but I was still applying places just to see what was out there. Notre Dame, I remember, had reached back out about 24 hours after I applied, went through their interview process, and it was like a part-time, short-term seasonal assistant because of COVID. They were on a hiring freeze. It was crazy during that time. So they kind of brought me on in that capacity, but after I went through the interview process, they're like, we need you here in like 3 days. So packed up, moved to South Bend, had my parents move me over there. It was a little bit closer to Erie, so they weren't too upset.
Right.
But went there, and then fortunately, one of the coaches that I had learned from when I interned was promoted to director during that time. So he had stayed in touch with actually 2 other guys I had interned with. One actually went to grad school with me at Gannon as well, but stayed in touch. And then as there were some openings, turnover from COVID, people moving back home, things like that, he had reached out and said, I really need somebody with basketball experience. Nobody on the staff did. Their basketball strength coach had left. And I was like, this is my one opportunity. Like, you always need that first person to take a chance on you for that full-time job in our field. Like, who's going to take that chance? Interviewed with all the coaches, loved all the coaches that I met, already knew the director at the time, had worked under him. So super excited to get that offer. So being brought back, and then kind of each year building, getting more and more opportunities. So had started with quality control, just kind of getting my feet wet. We had a turnover in coaches. Strength coaches do bounce around, every couple of years. So our internship director had left. I was like, cool, let me give it a shot. I would love to do that. The internship program is super huge part of my life. It's very meaningful to me. So loved getting the chance to take that on. And then from there, this past year, we got back from basketball season, and they had an associate title that they had offered me for our department. So kind of jumped up and took that in March, and was super excited. So really happy that the place that taught me the most, my first real exposure in a college weight room, is where I'm able to give back and work with these athletes now. So yeah, I love it. It's been great.
Yeah. Well, it's one thing to hear about the success. And, as I'm reading the bio, I'm sure some people have heard that and said, of course, she's had all these opportunities. Of course, she's where she's at. But when you hear your story a little bit more about the things that happened during COVID and, the doors you're just trying to break down, basically, to get in and meet people and get the internships you've had, there's always a story to it. You don't just miraculously end up where you're at. And, it's kudos to you for keeping a positive attitude that, you were going to figure it out. Right. Were there other challenges that you faced in your career up to this point, and how have you overcome them? Or maybe COVID, what you've shared is the biggest one that you've overcome.
Yeah, I would say COVID's definitely a big one. A lot of people do ask me, especially young and upcoming coaches, what it is like being a female in my field. It is a male-dominated field. However, a lot of females are breaking into the field. I do have a lot of female mentors, which are amazing. But a lot of people do ask me that question. A lot of times there can be challenges. I will say nowadays more challenges, initially working with male athletes. My men's basketball team, I've had them since I started. They are my children. They are great. But some of them jokingly, now that I've had for 3 years, they were not happy when they found out I was their strength coach. They knew nothing about me, hadn't seen me, hadn't interacted with me. They saw my name and they were not happy. So my big philosophy and approach with coaching is I always take my athletes and I get to know them as people, then I can train them the way I want to. So I know almost everything about all of my kids. I've met their families, their girlfriends, their boyfriends, everything. I go to all the games. I don't miss anything. So I'm a huge part of their lives. And I mean, most people don't realize it, but we are the ones on staff that spend the most time with these athletes, because there are certain parts of the year where the head coaches cannot have contact with athletes. However, strength and conditioning coaches, we train the athletes year round. So we are the only coaches with them year round. So I'm with these kids every day of the week almost, unless, we have like winter break, things like that. But they're a huge part of my life. But getting to know them as people, that's definitely one of the big parts that's contributed to my success with training them. I will say other challenges, sometimes coaches can be difficult. Trying to think, just working in the collegiate setting, sometimes there's a lot of rules to abide by at NCAA, making sure you're following protocol, doing things the way you need to train the athletes appropriately. Those are probably the big ones. I mean, the hard part is at the beginning of strength and conditioning. It is difficult because nobody's going to give you a head strength coach job until you've actually done it before. So like, that's why you do have to do the internships, the paid internships, the GA positions. Your first day coaching a team, like you have to have some experience. So that's, it's, some people think it's a flaw to our field that you're working unpaid and all of that, but until you actually coach, it's hard to, be in charge and run things on your own. So I would say like that's the biggest hurdle to get over in this field for sure.
And I'm sure you look back on young Abby and you think there's no way she would have been ready for this opportunity if she didn't do that time, right?
Oh, I still say to this day, I'm like, I don't even know what I want to be when I grow up yet. So
just paying your dues all around. We'll see where it goes.
Figuring it out. Yeah, 1 year at a time.
Yeah, and that's a very interesting take you had too on the dynamic of you being a female hired into this role, and people don't even know who you are. They just see your name on there and they were upset. To now fast forward a few years later, obviously you knew what you were doing and you had their best interests and you made it work. And your philosophy that you're talking about of the, the relationship with those players where they know you, you know them now, and it just worked out to be a great success in terms of getting the team to where it can be. Another question I had when thinking through this podcast episode with you is, can you share a memorable success story from your coaching career so far?
I will say it's tough because the first immediate one that comes to mind is the most recent. Was it March? We won the Ivy League tournament. It was a buzzer beater. Oh my God, it was the most insane game I had ever seen. So the Ivy League has an automatic bid. So we won our tournament, got a bid to March Madness, got flown out to Spokane, Washington, played Auburn in the first round, and we won. So we beat Auburn. That was insane. Most people write the Ivy League off, don't even think we deserve a bid, things like that. So one of the best games in Yale program history. There's only one other team that made it past the first round. It was about 8 years ago against Baylor. So to beat Auburn in a round like that, was incredible. We did lose in the second round, but still amazing, because I think one of my goals kind of accepting this job 3 years ago, I said, before the age of 30, I would love to coach a team that plays in March Madness. And I did that at 25, my first year. So then this past year, to win the Ivy tournament again and then win a first round with this team was incredible, because I've been with these kids for 3 years. So that's like the big one that stands out to me. Obviously, that's more the fun side of thing, like winning and all of that is the fun side. But I will definitely say nothing is more fulfilling than, unfortunately, if you have an athlete that, experiences an injury, goes through surgery, you help rehab them, see them getting back on the field or the court is the most fulfilling thing. Just seeing them happy and doing what they love. And getting to experience that's one of the best parts. And I mean, day to day, just coming in to see them. So many of my kids will come up to my office just to hang out. Half the time they don't even want to lift. They're like, oh, we're just here to play music. We're here for the vibes. I bring my dog in every day. They just want to play with the dog. So just kind of the overall environment. I love coming into work every day and just seeing them. So like that is the most rewarding part. But then, like I said, the winning is fun as well.
Winning is great. Yeah. Winning's nice when that happens too.
Yeah.
But it's a great, feeling that you were a part of that, and you're not the players on the court, you're not the head coach, but the role that you have helped those players get to where they were able to go. And you being a part of that, I'm sure it was a crazy week getting out there, doing all the stuff, then winning the opening round, and then watching the rest of the games go and finding out even who you're going to play in 2 days.
Yeah.
I'm sure the experience was just electric, just amazing.
It was incredible. This job has taken me to some amazing places. I'm very thankful.
Yeah. And I'm thinking about, maybe there's people listening to this episode that they're aspiring to be Abby Quinn, or have a career like you've had so far, right? They want to be able to do strength and conditioning coaching in this whole field. What advice do you have for people listening that want to pursue a career in what you're doing?
Hands-on experience is the best thing you can do. Don't say no to any time. Any internships, any observation hours, even if you don't have the opportunity, like I did, to just up and move to New Haven, local gyms, private training facilities, reaching out to local schools, even like Gannon, Penn State Barron, Mercyhurst, and just saying, hey, can I just stop by and get observation hours? Just watch what you do, be around the athletes, be in the environment. It is kind of what you make of it. As long as there's, some athletes or facilities nearby, you can usually find stuff, but as much time as you can get. I will say my field definitely relies heavily on networking as well. A lot of times jobs or openings are all talked through verbally, like, hey, I need somebody that has these characteristics, this training philosophy and style. Do you know anybody that would be a good fit? A lot of times jobs are already spoken for before they're even posted. Or like once they are posted, the person's already hired. Not all the times, but it just shows you that networking is a huge part. People want to know, they want a certain fit for their team. So I'm not a fit for every team, but I might be a fit for what somebody's looking for. So networking is huge. Conferences that you go to, you can meet a lot of people that might set you up with other opportunities. Being open to doing GA positions, that is one thing. I think if I knew a little bit more about the field and the progression, I would have done a little bit differently. I would have probably looked for a graduate school that offered a GA position where I could have gotten like a stipend, taken on more teams, specifically with strength and conditioning. The program, the way I did it, I got to control a lot of it and do a lot of the programming, which was great. But in the other GA sense, you can get your master's paid for and kind of have other coaches and mentors watching over you that are strength coaches. And kind of set you up and go from there. So I would have done that a little bit differently, but the connections are huge. The time with athletes are huge, and any opportunity you can get, just take it. And then continuing education is huge as well. There's research published every single day. I try to read like one thing a day just to stay some like 1% on top of it. But that's where like all those certifications come from. That you had listed off in my bio at the beginning, just to, we have technology in our weight room. I use force plates, GPS catapult, velocity-based training. Our racks are outfitted with cameras, all of this stuff that you kind of have to keep up to it because it's evolving every single year I've been here. There's new elements, so you have to stay up with that as well.
Yeah, you have to read how to use it and then how to use it for your athletes too, right? Not just the function of it, but actually how to make it work and produce results and all that. That sounds really cool though. What a fun position to be in. And great advice too. I'm a big believer in putting yourself out there regardless of your field to make connections and network, and you just never know where that could lead, even if it's not a job per se, but it leads to an opportunity down the road that you don't even know that you're going to be pursuing or anything. So what a great opportunity right there with that too. One of the questions I had for you too is, you sound like a very disciplined person. You're very motivated. What motivates you to continually strive for excellence, in your career?
That's a good question. I don't know if there's just like one thing that answers that. I don't know. My parents have just been so supportive from day one. With a minute I went from a very reasonable, conventional career, such as nursing, a stable career, to strength and conditioning that we knew nothing about. They said, sure, go for it. We will support you. So that's been a huge driving factor. They didn't question it from day one. There's people that thought I was crazy for wanting to do this, just because it's not very big in Erie right now. You kind of have to get out and explore a little bit. It is growing. I know there are positions available, but when I was there was not. So their support just kind of You know, how they raised me. I was always working, you know, doing clubs, multiple sports, things like that. And they just kept me going, were super supportive. I would say too, a big part of it is just the athlete's success, like seeing what you can accomplish and like how do we continue growing and getting better each year. So they kind of inspire me every year. The success that we have, like how can I do more for you guys? How can I be better? Or if we don't have that great of a year, where do we go wrong and kind of keep pushing? I think it's more that competitive edge just from playing sports growing up too kind of carries over into this. I will say with work, you're right, I'm probably like pretty disciplined, pretty put together. Outside of that, my mom will say I'm a mess. I can't keep my room clean. I'm scattered all over the place. But for work in athletics, I can definitely get it together for that.
That's funny. I mean, I grew up playing sports. I know what you're talking about, that competitive edge you develop, through youth sports, and then you go on to play in high school, and you've been able to take that and just continue to translate it into the same idea, but in a profession now where you get to help other athletes do what you were doing, which is really neat. Well, I just have a couple other questions for you as we wind down on this episode of the podcast, but looking ahead, what are your goals and your aspirations for the future of your career, and what you're doing?
Longer term, I'm thinking just with the way I've gotten to move up here, I would really love to be a director of a strength and conditioning department. I just think with my experience being the internship director, then kind of going up to associate, overseeing some staff. I do think I do really enjoy developing athletes, but also other members on staff through being a mentor for coaches, because my mentors have been such a huge influence. So I would long term love to run a department and a staff. In addition to that, I definitely lean a little bit more towards basketball. I love all of my teams, but there are a lot of positions at Power 5 schools, bigger schools, where you don't have as many teams. You maybe work with one or two programs. So this opportunity at Yale has been amazing. I've been exposed to so many things. Like I said, the internship, I've done budgeting, I've done operations, I've worked with eight given teams here at Yale, which has given me the background in coaching that I do have to help program. But kind of as I get older and want to slow down a little bit, focus on one team, I think longer term, that would be the goal, is to be a director of a department and probably work with a basketball team. That way, I have 15 to 18 athletes. I love individualizing programming, so I can individualize for all of my kids, get to travel to every single thing, things like that. So as I'm getting older, that's the goal, to get one of those jobs. Kind of as you move up in strength and conditioning, you can kind of relax a little bit more. So longer term.
I know some of our listeners are shaking their head going, as she's getting older, they're thinking she's so young.
Yeah.
Well, we appreciate you sharing that all, and we'll be cheering you on all along the way. Me and you are friends on Facebook, and I saw when you made your post about after March Madness, after things settled down, and it was so exciting to see. I knew you were at Yale, to see them win that game, and then to just see the things that you've shared about your journey along the way. It's so cool and so exciting. Well, cool, Abby. Well, I appreciate the time. Like I said, kind of in the middle of the podcast there, one thing that's evident and something we can all take from this episode is that you are a true professional, and knowing that you care a lot about what you're doing, but the expertise behind it to really put it into action, that's something we can all do better. And I know myself too. I can continue to read an article a day about what's in my field that I can be better in, and continue to strive to, do great things. So just appreciate the time that you took to record this episode with us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm glad I can still, in a sense, be part of the Prep and Villa community. It was great to hear from you. Appreciate you reaching out. Appreciate your time. Excited to have been able to do this and be your first virtual one.
That's right, the first virtual guest. So I know you don't know exactly when you'll be back here next, but when you do, let us know. We'd love to have you here at Prep, get a tour of the new building, see Sonia, and do all that good stuff. So
yes, I would love to.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Abby.
Thank you so much.